Morning. Okay, so just I'm going to make this a quick one for everybody who thinks that they're too long, but there's a lot of story to tell. So I'm going to keep this quick. Where I left you off last time in chapter 7 was after I confronted Mr. X, I ended up going back to his office and having a conversation. And we got some things straightened out that no more awkwardness, no more lying, no more bullshit. He asked me to come back to work. What I didn't mention, because I didn't want to go into as much detail, but I will now, is that at that time, well, I did mention it, but here I have, at that time, I asked Mr. X for vacation. So I had sent him a vacation request in writing, because like I said, I am not a dumb woman. Um, I am a professional, and almost everything I do, especially at this point with Mr. X, is done in writing so that I have a written record of it and his responses. Um, so I did request in writing some vacation time because my daughter was graduating high school. I needed to prepare for her graduation, for the graduation party, for getting my house back on the market, trying to figure out how to do that. Because at this point, even though Mr. X kept telling me that, oh, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, I'm pretty resolved to the idea that it's not going to happen. So now I have my family and my ex-husband in limbo, and I have to kind of try and rectify that because this was because of a decision that I made. Um, so you have that. I had that guilt, that sense of responsibility for their lives in the balance as well. So I requested some time off to get that done. So Mr. X approved my time off when I left his office. I had gone back to my office that day, and he called me back in, as he usually did. And he said, I just got off the phone after, well, he said, after what happened at Cassidy's, I went and I retained some corporate attorneys because I was really afraid after you threatened my family. I said, stop saying that. I threatened you. I did not threaten your family. I threatened to expose you. But whatever. Why'd you call me in here? And he said, instead of you taking vacation, I'd like to buy you out of your contract and have you sign a new contract. Now, keep in mind, my original work contract at that time, he was begging me to come work for him. If you remember, he was chasing after me, really, really recruiting me hard to come work for him. So even back then, my gut instinct was telling me something was wrong. So my work contract reflected in that I felt like I needed a way out. Because understand that an employment contract is only as good as its exit strategy. That's what your employment contract is for. So in my original employment contract, it said that after 12 months that I had the right, or Mr. X had the right, to terminate the contract without consequence voluntarily if it wasn't working out, and that I would get 1 year's severance. So I'd get a year's salary if he or I terminated the contract. Now, that goes to show you how badly Mr. X wanted me to come work for him, because nobody in their right mind, even my attorney, when he reviewed the contract, said if his attorney lets him sign this, he's crazy. But Mr. X wanted me to work for him that bad, he didn't care. He signed it. So now I have this work contract that says, this existing work contract that says that after a year I have the right to terminate this contract, and he has to pay me a year's salary. So now he retains these really good corporate attorneys who looked over my contract, probably told him he was crazy for even signing this, and recommended that I sign a new contract. So now he wants to buy me out of my old contract and have me sign a new contract that obviously makes more sense to him, for his attorneys. Okay, let me think about that. Let's see what the new contract says. So I go back to my office. A little bit later, he calls me back in again. What's going on? What's up? Okay, I decided I don't want to buy you out of your contract because that means that I have to terminate your employment and rehire you. And I'm not comfortable not having you as an employee. What do you mean not comfortable? I'm going to sign a new contract. Yeah, but then you won't be considered so it was like a control thing. Like even if it was for a brief moment, I was no longer an employee of Mr. X and he couldn't have that. So instead, he decided he was going to grant me a leave of absence for the summer so that I could do what I had to do at the house because he knows he's responsible. I could take care of my kids and get things done and come back. He was going to pay me to go home for the summer and fix the mess that he made, provided I sign a new contract. Okay, well, I only asked for vacation days. So I don't even see where the problem is. The problem is when everything went down over at Cassidy's, I felt like I needed to protect myself. So I went to these attorneys and they told me that I am completely exposed and I have nothing in the contract protects me. It all protects you. Well, he's like, and you knew that, and yet you wait a second. That was your contract. It wasn't my job or my attorney's job to point out to you that the contract favored my exit strategy. But whatever, Mr. CEO. So I go back to my office and said, well, let me see what the new contract is. And it's going to require an NDA or release. That pretty much says you can't say anything about my business. I'm familiar with what an NDA is. Have your attorney write it up, and we'll go over it, and I'll let you know if it's doable or not. Okay, but it's going to take a little while. I'm not going to have it right away. Okay, that's fine. So now I think at this point, I was in New York City, for another couple of weeks before I went home because that Friday there was no money in ADP, and I did the payroll. So Mr. X called me in and he said that we're not going to do payroll from ADP this week. I'm going to pay cash. Why? Because I just have to do it this way. Okay. At this point, guys, I know that there's no real job here. I am just trying to make a paycheck until I can get to my next move. I'm trying not to have a gap between employment. I'm trying not to have a gap between paychecks, income. So, okay, whatever you want to do. So that Friday, we get paid cash, but we don't get paid our whole paycheck. So we're supposed to get it the following Friday. So I remember, because then the next Friday, there was no paychecks. There was no money in ADP. There was no paychecks. Our paychecks were waiting again until the next Friday. So at that point, I go back to North Carolina. I still don't have any contract to sign, any nothing. So I go back to North Carolina. My daughter's going to graduate high school. I have to get my house ready. I go back. I'm there another week, no paycheck. Then Mr. X calls me up and says, listen, I'm going to pay you guys all of your back pay. I understand that I owe you money. Then he says, but let's be honest, it's not like you guys have actually been working hard. Well, let's be honest. It's not like you actually have a business for us to work hard in. This is all in your head. Let's be honest. You're not having dinners with Mark Wahlberg. You are not getting massages with Eric Clapton. You are not on the phone with Ryan Seacrest. It's in your head. It's not happening. Anyway, he says, but I have good news. I got your new contract and the NDA from the attorney. So I'm going to send it to you. Go over it, redline it, send it to your attorney, do what you have to do, and send it back to me, and we'll negotiate. Okay. So I look at the agreement, and I have it here. Okay. I have highlighted some of the things that are most important that we need to pay attention to. There was no need for me to redline any of this. I was never signing this contract. Never. Anybody with a second grade education would not sign this contract. So I'm just going to read some excerpts from the conditions of my new contract and my release, my NDA, in order for my house to get funded, my payroll to continue. So this was, let me just read some of it, okay? So the first one is the contract itself, the employment agreement, is pretty straightforward, except for where it hides some things like my duties. It says that I will, of course, still be the vice president of operations. Tells me I will oversee the operations of the company, special projects, designated by the CEO, and shall also perform such other duties in the ordinary course of business as performed by other persons in similar such positions, as well as such other reasonable duties as may be assigned from time to time by the employer. And this is the part I want you to pay most attention to. Employees' duties shall be rendered at employer's business premises or at such other places as the employer may require or agree to. So basically, I have to do my job or whatever job he tells me to. That's what that paragraph says. Which is, of course, any other company, of course, you're going to do what the CEO says. This is a little different. So this says I have to do whatever he says, whatever task he wants, anywhere he wants me to do it. So if he wants to work for the day at my apartment, it says, and because he pays for it, or at his apartment, I am required or I agree to do so. Immediately, I knew I needed to not redline this contract. Loyalty and best offer. During the employee's term of employment with the employee will devote her full time and best efforts to the business of employee and will not engage in any business activity which competes with the products or services. Okay, so basically it's saying I can't go to another real estate broker and share, Mr. X's practices. Okay, fine. It says my compensation, my yearly salary, which stayed the same. So all of that stuff is pretty normal. Then I'm entitled to use of a company leased vehicle. Employee will issue me an easy pass for the vehicle. Employer, rather. Air travel. The employer will provide the employee, being me, with access card to company airplanes. Read it. So, not only is he lying to everybody, he's now lying to this attorney that he's paying to write up this contract. There is no company airplane. There is no private jet. There's nothing. None of that. Okay. Anything else that sticks out on here? Confidential information. Employee understands and agrees that employee may see, hear, or otherwise become privy to information about President and CEO of Company X as a condition of and as material inducement to employees' employment with him. So basically, I can't, if I hear something about his business, I can't repeat it, if it's confidential. Remedies. Employee acknowledges that any violation, now the employee is me, of course, that any violation of this agreement will cause employer immediate and irreparable harm, and that the damages which the employer may suffer may be difficult or impossible to measure. His damages. He has damages now. Therefore, upon any actual or impending violation of this agreement, employer shall be entitled to the issuance of an ex parte restraining order against me, preliminary and permanent injunction without bond, restraining or enjoining such violation by employer or any entity or person acting in concert with the employee. An employee has the right to request that employee account for and pay over to employer all compensations, profits, monies, accruals, increments, or other benefits derived or received as a result of any transactions constituting a breach of any provisions. So now he wants to get a restraint. If I breach this contract, or I violate the agreement, or I cause him any irreparable harm, which isn't defined. What's irreparable harm? Because I have irreparable harm at this point. Not only is he going to take out a restraining order on me, but he's going to have me arrested without bond, and I have to pay him back. Totally out of his mind. But that wasn't the worst of it. Then I look at the second document. The second document is the NDA. NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. It means that there are certain things that I have to agree to that I cannot repeat, I cannot discuss. I'm bound to this contract, saying that I can't talk about certain things. I can't. Usually, an NDA has to do with the industry process and the secret sauce that goes into your product or your engineering of your product, or future releases of your product, things that could do damage to the company if they got into your competitors' hands. That's typically what a non-disclosure agreement is for. Now, let me read to you some of Mr. X's non-disclosure agreement. I highlighted the important stuff. Um, Whereas employee and president and CEO of Company X are currently involved in a voluntary romantic relationship, said relationship being free from any coercion involving employees' employment. Stop right there. Stop right there. I didn't even, at that moment, I just sat back. I didn't even read the rest of this contract, of this agreement. So you're saying basically that you want me to agree that we were in this relationship so that I can't turn around and do what I said I was going to do at Cassidy's and sue your ass for sexual harassment. Because that's what this was. Not going to happen. But I'll tell you what, you had a lot of balls to put that in this document. Whereas employee requires a leave of absence and is desirous of benefits greater to any which she would be entitled to by law. I requested a vacation. That's what I requested. You requested that you put me on leave of absence or buy out my contract because your attorneys knew that if I sued you for all the things I said I was going to sue you for, including fraud, that you were going to have a problem under my old contract. Now keep in mind, signing any of this nullifies my original contract. It's not going to happen. Whereas employee has been a valuable employee of employer and employer wishes to provide employee with leave and other benefits in exchange for the mutual promise set forth herein. So in other words, I'll keep you employed and you can keep your job and I'll give you the leave of absence if you agree to let me off the hook for everything. Sounds like a bribe to me. Whereas the parties wish for employee to return to her job unencumbered by concerns relating to her property in North Carolina. So in other words, I return to my job and you never have to fund my house. It's never part of any agreement. Not like you closed on it or anything. But if I sign this, I agree that you don't have to do shit about the fact that you closed with an attorney on my house and never funded it. Not going to happen. Whereas the employer and the employee are parties to an employment agreement dated January 26, 2015, which both parties wish to hereby cancel and render null and void. So my original contract becomes null and void under this agreement and my second or proposed new contract. Whereas the employee, in order to benefit from the future services of the employee, wishes to supersede the previous employment agreement and enter into the new employment agreement appended hereto as Exhibit A, pursuant to which the employee will continue to be employed as Vice President of Operations. So I can keep my job, I keep my title, my job about nothing, if I agree that this nullifies my original contract. Whereas both employee and employer wish to make clear that there are no past or present disputes or differences of a legal nature between them, including but not limited to any claims related to employee's employment and or her relationship with Mr. X. My relationship with Mr. X. So basically, I have no disputes with him. None whatsoever. We're just going to, like an Etch-a-Sketch, just going to shake it, and everything's going to be clean from this point forward. The employment agreement. Employer and employee hereby agree that the employee employment agreement that the parties entered into as of January 26th is hereby deemed null and void and to have no further effect. This is the third place it says this, because that's how much he's exposed with his first contract. Leave of absence. Employee commenced a leave of absence for personal, non-medical reasons on June 1st, 2015. No, I did not. I requested a vacation time to fix the mess that you made, Mr. X. You requested a leave of absence. First, you requested to buy out my contract. Then you suggested to do a leave of absence. I didn't need a leave of absence. I just needed a couple of weeks, a week, to be in North Carolina to get my stuff taken care of. The loose ends that you left loose. Employer agrees to provide employee leave from her duties until September 1st, 2015, the leave. Employer agrees to enter into the employment agreement appended hereto as Exhibit A as long as employee executes and does not revoke this agreement and returns to work on or prior to September 1st, 2015. So, here I am in North Carolina. Here's what's going through my head. Yeah, I'm going to take your leave of absence. This was before I left. I'm going to take your leave of absence, but there is no way in hell that I'm coming back to work for you. So I know at this point that I'm in North Carolina with no intention of going back to New York City or Mr. X. But if you want to pay me a leave of absence until September, that's fine. But I know in my head I'm not coming back. So Mr. X's attorneys, being smarter than his first attorneys, knew to put in there that the only way this leave of absence is going to happen is if I return to work in September. So I know right then and there, okay, so I'm not taking a leave of absence because I knew all along I was going to call my mentor, my colleague, and I was going to get a whole nother job. But if he wanted to pay me for the summer to fix his mess, I was willing to accept that offer, but not at the risk of having to go back there in September because that just wasn't going to happen. Okay. Pay and benefits during leave. Provided employee executes and does not revoke this agreement, employer will pay employee a salary of $25,000 per month during the leave. During the leave, employee's benefits will continue under the same terms and conditions as if she was actively employed. Just so you can see. $25,000 per month. You couldn't even pay me my last week's salary. You're going to pay me $25,000 a month? General release of claims. Now this is where it gets very interesting. And this is the last that I'll read from this document so I don't bore you. But general release of claims. As if it wasn't interesting enough that I would have to agree to all this bullshit in order for him to not pay me the $25,000 a month he said he's going to pay me. Because employee and employer wish to make clear that there are no past or present disputes or differences of legal nature between them, including, but not limited to, any claims related to employee's employment and her relationship with Mr. X, in exchange for the consideration provided pursuant to this agreement, employee knowingly and voluntarily releases and forever discharges and its parent corporations of Company X and its parents' corporations, affiliates, subsidiaries, divisions, predecessors, insurers, successors, and assigns, and their current and former employees, attorneys, officers, directors, and agents, and thereof both individually in their business capacities and adjusters of any form of any and all claims known and unknown, asserted or unasserted, which the employee has or may have against the employer as of the date of execution of the agreement. This release against the releasees includes, but is not limited to, any alleged violation of any claims, whether statutory, common law, or otherwise, arising out of the terms or conditions of employee's employment or employer. Any claims, whether statutory, common law, or otherwise, arising out of the facts and circumstances of her employment and the termination of her employment at employer. Any claims for breach of contract, my house, quantum merit, unjust enrichment, breach of oral promise, torturous interference with business relations, injurious falsehood, defamation, negligent or intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and any other common law contract and tort claims. Any claims for unpaid or lost benefits or salary, bonus, vacation pay, severance pay, or other compensation. Any claims for attorney's fees, costs, and expenses, damages or personal injuries. Any claims of employment discrimination, harassment, or its retaliation, whether based on federal, state, or local law, or judicial or administrative decision. So that last paragraph, what Mr. X and his attorneys decided to say was that this releases him and any affiliation he has from basically doing anything, from right down to personal injury, to fraud, to the harassment, to the emotional distress. By signing this, I release him of anything. He basically it just says he could do whatever he wants, and it's okay because I signed this piece of paper, and because he's paying me to say it's okay. Like I'm some high-priced call girl, I can say for $25,000, you can harass the shit out of me. You can cause me a tremendous amount of distress. You could turn my whole life upside down, and it's okay because you're going to give me money. Even if you had the money, It's not okay. I would have never signed this paper, ever. So I called Mr. F and I told him. He said, did you send me a red line copy? No, I didn't send you a red line copy. There is no need. The whole document would be one big red line. There is no need for me to send you a red line copy. There is no need for me to pay my attorney to look it over. Starting from the very first paragraph where it says that I admit having a relationship with you. What is that about? Well, I mean, because we know each other before. No, 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 no. That's not what it says. It says that we are in a romantic relationship. So what are you're trying to establish that I have no grounds for any kind of harassment claim? Is that what you're doing? Because and you're trying to pay me off to say it. So I'm very aggravated at this point. But keep in mind, like I said, I knew I wasn't going back there. So I didn't really care at this point. Like I said, if I could get the money for, and maybe that sounds horrible, but I don't feel it sounds horrible. My whole life has been turned upside down. I left my job, my kids, my house, because of this opportunity that didn't even exist, that was stuck in his head. I had other people leave their jobs and they weren't getting paid. And that was on my head. So I didn't feel bad. You want to pay me leave of absence money? I know damn well I am not coming back. But I also know damn well I'm not signing that contract. Because in that contract, you might as well admit that you harassed me, that you caused me emotional distress, that this was all fraud and all fake, because everything in that contract is to erase everything that you've done. So thank you for adding credibility to what I have been saying all along by putting it in writing, because your attorney knows that the first contract that you wrote and said an attorney wrote was, he probably got a template off the internet. He was crazy to sign, and it left him exposed. So then he says to me, well then, okay, I'll go back to the attorney. You know how attorneys are. They're just, they always go for the jugular. I don't have to agree with it. They work for me. I don't want you to not come back. And I don't want you to feel this way about me.